Hey, this is Wendy Ponomarenko. I'm the art teacher and librarian at Temple Emanu-El. As part of the ongoing library project, I've been reading, recording, and editing and posting up on the Facebook page a book a night from our library while the public libraries in our Temple library are closed to the public at the moment. So tonight's book is A Concert in the Sand, which takes place in Tel Aviv in Israel. It's about a very special orchestra. Hope you enjoy. This is A Concert in the Sand by Tami, Shem-Tov, and Rachella Sandbank, and the illustrations are by Avi Ofer. It's boring hanging out at Mom and Dad's delicatessen. Lots of construction workers come in to buy sandwiches for lunch, so my parents don't have time for me. My grandma has time, but she only speaks German, and I don't. Grandma shrugs and smiles, and she waits for me by the door. Grandma and I are going out, I say. Where to, Uri? Mom asks. Where to, Grandma? I ask, turning toward her, but she's already out the door, so off I go too. Where does Grandma want to go? Ah, of course, the beach. I take her hand as we head toward the sparkling sand. There it is, the great blue sea of Tel Aviv. Fishermen are casting their lines into the water. Too bad we can't go swimming. It's winter time now. Grandma gazes out into the distance. What is she thinking about? The house where she grew up? The friends she knew long ago? Back on the street, I see two men in coats. They pass by carrying funny-shaped cases. Grandma points at them and starts walking. Where does Grandma want to go? Oh, of course. She wants some seltzer. We stop at a kiosk. A man is buying a raspberry seltzer. Grandma gets an apricot seltzer, my favorite, and she hands me the cup. The man joins the other two men, and Grandma continues walking. Where are we going now? Grandma's walking quickly. Maybe she's following the men with the funny-shaped cases. Maybe she likes pretending to be a spy, like I do. There's no one like Grandma. As we walk down the street, something strange happens. More men carrying funny-shaped cases appear. They shake hands and laugh with the others. I stop so they won't realize we're following them. Grandma stops too, and we peer into the display window of Mr. and Mrs. Gross's bookstore. That's my favorite book, I say, pointing to Robinson Crusoe. Grandma already knows that. Come on, Uri, she says. The men with the funny-shaped cases are moving on, too. As we make our way through the park, I spot Danny and Aaron from class hanging upside down on the monkey bars. I join them. Suspended between heaven and earth, I see the world upside down. Even Grandma's upside down. She's sitting on a bench chatting with a friend. And they both have the exact same hairdo. 3 more people carrying funny-shaped cases cross the park. A leap, a jump, and Grandma and I are right behind them. Why is Grandma stopping now? Oh, to check out the new apartment building that's being built. When I saw it last week, it only had 2 stories, but now it has 3. I look up and see workers shimmy down ropes to reach the ground. What fun that must be! I'd like to join them. They brush the dust off their clothes. One puts on a hat, the other a jacket, and then they set off on foot. Where are they headed? I like the Rosie the Riveter character here. The street is getting crowded. Everyone is heading in the same direction. Fishermen and construction workers and the guy who sells seltzer at the kiosk, Mr. and Mrs. Gross from the bookstore with their dog, boys and girls and Grandma and me. Leading the crowd is the group of people carrying the funny-shaped cases. We've become a parade. A man in a brown coat is attracting a lot of attention. Everybody wants to talk to him. Is he important? Grandma walks toward him. Does she know him? Suddenly the man spots her. As he comes to greet her, other people stop him, patting him on the shoulder and chatting with him in different languages. Mazel tov! Good luck, Mr. Huberman, they say. Mr. Huberman comes over to talk to Grandma, and they shake hands. They speak in German, and then Mr. Huberman looks at me and pats me on the head. "Ah, so you're the grandson," he says. "I know your grandmother from a long time ago, when we were both living in Europe." "This is Uri," Grandma introduces me proudly. "I'm happy that you've both come," Mr. Huberman says. But before I can ask, "Come for what?" Mr. Huberman has vanished into the crowd. The parade reaches a big auditorium, and everyone crowds inside. The people with the cases go up onto the stage and take their seats. We find a place on one of the benches facing the stage. A man wearing glasses takes a violin out of his case. A tall woman puts together her clarinet. A bald man takes out his drum, while another with curly hair tunes his cello. A small woman with big cheeks lifts her trumpet. The auditorium goes quiet. The mayor comes out on the stage. He welcomes the audience, praises the orchestra, and says to Mr. Huberman, "Thank you for bringing these excellent musicians together to create this orchestra for us." The audience rises with a standing ovation. The applause goes on and on. Mr. Huberman gazes out at the crowd with great emotion. Everyone is still clapping, together with the musicians, as Mr. Huberman takes his place on the stage and slips his violin between his shoulder and his chin. Famous Mr. Huberman knows my grandma, I think proudly to myself. The concert is about to begin. A man with a little stick approaches the podium. He's the conductor, Arturo Toscanini. He pauses for a moment, and then he gives the orchestra a signal. The music of the orchestra quickly fills the auditorium. The notes enter my ears and go straight to my heart. I turn and see that the same thing is happening to everyone. I didn't know that music could create such a feeling. Grandma puts her hand on mine. She has tears in her eyes, and I know that they are tears of happiness. The end. This book, A Concert in the Sand, actually takes place just after World War II, like a little bit more after World War II, but in Israel. And the person it's talking about, Mr. Huberman, was a Polish Jew who was a musical prodigy. And when he saw that the Nazis were rising to power in Europe, he actually went around Europe auditioning Jewish musicians who were just getting to the point that they were not being allowed to play in German orchestras, and German musical groups. They weren't allowed to have Jews in them, and they were kicking all their Jews out. And Mr. Huberman went around auditioning Jewish musicians, and he took 70 Jewish musicians from Europe and brought them down into Israel with him to start a new orchestra, the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra in Tel Aviv, which actually started in 1936. So he actually managed to get them all out. His group of 70 musicians, he got them all out of Europe before a lot of the major things were all happening in World War II. So this Philharmonic Orchestra in Israel, before Israel even officially became a nation, was gathered together by really, really talented musicians, Jewish musicians from Europe, and that Philharmonic Orchestra is still around in Israel today. So this is the only book we have that specifically talks about that, but yeah, it's a wonderful blessing of a book. You can definitely check it out, and you can see it in the Israel section in the juvenile stacks. Have a good night.